MMOs are a game genre that I am insanely passionate about, but 2019 felt like a kind of lackluster year for MMOs. I mean, yeah, we did get WoW Classic last year, but then Blizzard went through some pretty heavy PR issues, which certainly didn't help drive people towards WoW Classic at all. Nonetheless, 2020 is a new year, and I'm hopeful the second wave of the MMO genre is on its way. So let's take a look at some of the most promising MMOs, both old and new, that you should keep your eye on throughout the year. Number 1, Last Oasis. Last Oasis is a survival MMO being developed by a studio called Donkey Crew. It was supposed to be released towards the end of 2019, but has since been pushed back with a tentative release date of first quarter 2020. If you haven't heard of this game yet, it looks sick. This is definitely the MMO I'm most excited about releasing this year. Looking like a cross between Sea of Thieves and Rust, in Last Oasis, the Earth has stopped rotating, which means that as the Earth revolves around the sun, the land to the west is constantly being burnt up, while the land in the east is being unfrozen as it gets exposed to the sun's rays. Players have to survive in the region between these two extremes, and continue to migrate with it as it moves with the Earth's revolution. Players will find water, hunt creatures, brew vitamins, trade in a player-driven economy, and build a variety of bases. Bases can be permanent or portable, with the permanent ones being fortified right into the ground, and the portable ones sitting atop custom-built walkers. Combat can take place up close and personal with melee weapons, or at a range with weapons mounted on walkers, and players can even use grappling hooks Attack on Titan style to swing through the trees and scale heights. Clans can be formed for large groups of players, but both group and solo play are supposed to be viable options, with solo players being able to find niches only they can fulfill. Players can even chant with each other as a means of communication, and the options for chanting sounds were created so they are on key with the game's soundtrack at all times. How wild would that be if clans developed their own chants to communicate with members? All in all, it looks like a really cool game with tons of features and potential. The devs are really trying to pull out all the stops for this game, and if that means dealing with it getting pushed back a couple of months, I'm more than fine with that. Number 2, New World. New World is an MMORPG being developed and published by Amazon Game Studios that is expected to release on May 26th of this year. The game is set in the age of exploration, taking place on a fictional island called Aeternum that lies in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, where a malignant element called the Corruption distorts life as we know it, and it must be stopped. The dev team includes people who have worked on various titles like EverQuest, Destiny, and World of Warcraft, so let's hope that all of the varied experiences the developers possess can come together in a cohesive product. Combat is action-oriented, and player characters are classless, meaning players can create their own builds through the various systems in the game with weapon masteries, attributes, and the like. New World plans to feature both PvP and PvE content, and over time, Amazon's stance has wavered a bit as to how much PvP is too much for the kind of MMO they're trying to create. After some alpha testing with select players, it was decided that open world PvP would not be left in for the release version of the game, as it resulted in high-level players farming low-level players as soon as they left safe havens. So now it's planned that PvP will be an opt-in experience where players can choose to take part in faction conflicts and wars that can get as big as 50 versus 50 battles. I have high hopes for New World. The fact that Amazon is willing to put its name behind such a large-scale title hopefully bodes well for the quality of the game, and you never know what cool Twitch integrations Amazon might try and get created for it, but only time will tell. Number 3, Crowfall. Crowfall was that MMORPG we thought just might be able to fill the void in our lives for a good World of Warcraft alternative back in January of 2015 when it was announced. Today, Crowfall still isn't officially released, but it is available in live pre-alpha testing phases, which you can get access to by purchasing one of the backer packs from Crowfall's official website. Crowfall is admittedly a very ambitious title. When campaigns begin, players will spawn into the new world, needing to discover its geography to reveal locations on the world map, and collect resources to craft various items and build fortresses for defense. Each season comes with its own dynamic weather events that affect the world, and as the seasons progress, resources become more scarce and monsters become more powerful. Tensions will rise between guilds and factions as food runs out and stat penalties are incurred, and merchants will be able to jack up their prices as supplies continue to drop. At the end of winter, a victor is declared, and the world goes offline forever. Players, also called crows, can then head back to their homeworld to count their spoils before making their way to a new, procedurally generated world. Like the previous titles on this list, Crowfall's combat is considered to be action-based, with dodging, dashing, blocking, and positioning playing important roles in every fight. But the general consensus seems to be that Crowfall's combat is less about twitch reflexes and more about fighting strategically and knowing your classes. Knowing that the game already has 42 unique class-race combinations, there is certainly going to be a lot for players to learn and get used to. Tack that on to Crowfall's vessel system, gear, and passive skills that allow you to fine-tune your build, and you've got an MMO that gives you deep control over your character's stats. Crowfall has a solid concept with some unique features that make it stand out, so hopefully we will see an official, full release for this MMO sometime by the end of 2020. Number 4, Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV is nothing new to the MMO space if you've been paying any attention at all over the last few years. Since its release in 2010, Final Fantasy XIV has carved out a name for itself in the MMO space with its interesting storyline, great soundtrack, and tab-targeted combat, with some hailing it as the best MMORPG that's currently out there. Although whether Final Fantasy XIV is actually the best MMORPG is up for debate, I think it's fairly safe to say it's still regarded as one of the best MMORPGs available at this time, with small, regular additions to the story being made every couple of months to help bridge the story and gameplay to the next major expansion that typically drops every 2 years now. There is always a reason for you and your friends to come back and play every once in a while you wait for that next piece of meaty content to release. For example, Final Fantasy XIV's most recent major expansion, Shadowbringers, dropped in July of last year and bumped the level cap to 80, introduced new zones, new raid and dungeon content, 2 new classes, also known as jobs, and introduced 2 new playable races. It is worth noting that if you're unfamiliar with Final Fantasy XIV's payment model, it is a subscription-based game and does require you to purchase any major expansions if you want to experience new portions of content. However, purchasing new expansions gives access to all the previous ones, so right now if you purchase Shadowbringers, you get access to the Storm's Blood and Heavensward expansions as well. Additionally, the subscription fee for the game shakes out to about $12.99 per month in its cheapest form, depending on how long you want to subscribe for, which makes it comparable to the cost of a World of Warcraft subscription. Possibly one of the more exciting bits of news about Final Fantasy XIV is that it's getting a live-action TV spin-off, which is said to be including production from some of the same people involved in the Witcher series. When this was announced back in 2019, we had yet to see anything come of The Witcher's Netflix series. But now that we've been able to see the first season, I'm more than excited to see how the same people handle Final Fantasy XIV. The only confirmed character for the series at this time is Cid, but really, as long as we know he's there, do we need anybody else confirmed? Hopefully we will see this live adaptation garner even more interest for the MMO and help boost its population. Number 5, Temtem. Temtem is a new creature collecting MMO that just released this year and really seems to have come out of nowhere. It was successfully funded on Kickstarter in 2018, but any news about the game was pretty quiet up until the past couple months prior to its release. Having been popularly referred to as Pokemon Online, Temtem gives players the chance to become their own Temtem tamer, exploring 6 different floating islands to discover new species and make new friends. This MMO's story-based campaign sees players building their ultimate team of Temtems to battle dojo leaders and fight an evil clan, which may as well directly follow the story to most Pokemon games. But to add to the fun and make the game a little more like an MMO, players can also build their own house, customize their character's appearance with different items, run into other players throughout the world, and even take on other players in competitive battles that include a pick-ban phase similar to what MOBA players are used to. With a buy-to-play payment model, Temtem only requires a one-time purchase, and the developers plan to always be adding new content in the form of missions, cosmetics, Temtems, events, and more. Although I don't think it's been expressly mentioned yet whether or not larger expansions down the line will need to be purchased as well. We'll just have to wait and see. Temtem appears to be fleshed out with the opportunity for a lot of future expansion, but this truly does feel like one of those games you either play and love, or you don't even try because it's not really your thing. The cutesy visuals may be a turnoff to some, but the polish of Temtem is undeniable, and it will be interesting to see if this game can fill the hole in the market for a true Pokemon MMO. Number 6, Crimson Desert. I'm a sucker for a gorgeous game, and if there's one thing that Pearl Abyss knows how to do, it's make one of those. Black Desert's character creator is widely regarded as one of the best character creators seen in an MMO thus far, and if its newly announced successor, Crimson Desert, includes anything similar, well then, I'm about to be a happy man. Aiming to run a beta test sometime this year, Crimson Desert is intended to be the sequel of Black Desert in spirit, but the devs have made it very clear that Crimson Desert will take place in a world that stands on its own, with only a few in-game homages to Black Desert. The world of Crimson Desert is set to be one filled with mythical creatures, cruel mercenaries, and powerful figures, all wrapped together in the action-driven combat system we've come to know Black Desert for. The storyline of Crimson Desert follows the tale of many different characters involved with the main character, McDuff, and his band of mercenaries, though that is all we really know right now. It'll be interesting to see if Crimson Desert follows the same business model as Black Desert, being buy-to-play with an in-game cash shop. Depending on your outlook on Black Desert's purchasable items, you might be inclined to argue that their pay-for-convenience factor is so strong that it basically makes the game pay to win by offering extremely useful inventory space, pets that make the looting process a lot easier, and cosmetic outfits with bonuses that heavily affect your character's economic efficiency, which is admittedly a pretty key factor in a game with as deep of an economy as Black Desert. I wouldn't be surprised to see the same business model kept for the Eastern release of Crimson Desert, as it seems to be much more accepted there, but I would love to see the pay-for-convenience factor toned down a bit to make a Western localization of the game more accepted. Number 7, Ashes of Creation. Ashes of Creation is a touchy subject for the MMO community. This fantasy MMORPG emphasizes player choice and enables players to change the game world in immense ways. Servers can differ drastically. For example, on one server the winter season may be completely normal, while on another it could last multiple seasonal cycles. Volcanoes may erupt on one server while yours completely avoids the catastrophe. When you complete a quest, if it causes a village to be destroyed or the terrain to be altered, that landscape is permanently altered until another action takes place to change it in an entirely new way. Everything you do has a consequence, and it will be felt throughout the world. As you explore the game world, you will come across nodes, which collect experience as players complete quests in their area. Complete enough quests, and that node can turn into a village, a city, or even a metropolis with enough effort. With player housing, a functioning economy, and 8 different races with primary classes and secondary classes to further specialize your character, this MMORPG should have a lot for you to sink your teeth into. Early on, development seemed to be screaming along for Ashes of Creation, but recently it feels as if the game's progress has slowed. Seeing that the development team spent time making a Battle Royale version of the game, Ashes of Creation Apocalypse, launching it on Steam as its own separate title, and even including a cash shop in it certainly hasn't sat well with many of the backers of the game. We should keep in mind this has been a planned part of their development cycle so they can test a lot of the systems the MMORPG will contain without having to spin up the full game. Couple this with development issues causing a crucial system within the game needing to be reworked, and you can begin to understand why the pace of development has been less than ideal. but just by reading through the Kickstarter page for Ashes of Creation, following their dev diaries on YouTube, and keeping up with the latest community outreaches from the development team, you can tell that they care deeply about their game. It's going to take time to get our hands on this MMO, and I hope that when we do, it becomes clear the developers were able to follow through on their big plans for this game. Number 8, Magic Legends. A newly announced MMO action RPG, Magic Legends is set in the multiverse of Magic the Gathering and allows players to become planeswalkers. By choosing their path through the planes and collecting different spells, players will control the chaos of battle and fight to save the multiverse from one of the biggest threats it has seen yet. Little information is available on Magic Legends right now that isn't already directly available on the game's official website. However, we can see that there are at least 5 initial classes being planned for, the 2 that we have information on being the Mind Mage, who uses psychic powers, and the Geomancer, who draws upon the power of the earth. It looks like we will also see 5 initial areas for the game, the first 2 being Shiv, a volcanic island, and Benalia, a world of plains and swamps. Combat is confirmed to be real-time, but the spells you cast will be drawn at random from your spell library as you fight. So there is going to be a real emphasis on properly building out your library with synergistic spells. I'm a bit disappointed to see you will only be able to travel with up to 2 players at any given time, but I am still excited to see what kind of storyline this game develops. Number 9, Project TL. Project TL is another one of those MMOs we have all probably been anxiously awaiting for quite some time. Originally announced in 2011 as Lineage Eternal, the now named Project TL was intended as the sequel to the first Lineage created by NCSoft. But it has undergone quite a few delays, including the most recent delay and rename due to a change in game producer, and thus a change in the game engine being used from the one that was used in Guild Wars to Unreal Engine 4. We aren't completely sure what the storyline of the game is yet, and there has yet to be a true 100% gameplay trailer released for the game, but it appears from the more cinematic trailer that is currently out that the combat being showcased is isometric in nature with a similar feeling to Lost Ark or Diablo. There is going to be a lot riding on Project TL having a successful release. To have been working on a game like this for so long and even deciding to switch game engines, NCSoft clearly believes in their vision behind Project TL. Fans of the Lineage franchise have been waiting nearly a decade for this game, and with the word of a closed beta phase coming in 2020, we are only left hoping that the full-fledged release of the game will soon follow. Number 10, Unknown Lord of the Rings MMO. Originally announced as a new MMO being developed by Athlon Games back in 2018, and recently gaining more traction now that it was announced it will be co-developed with Amazon Game Studios, this Lord of the Rings MMO is a bit of a mystery. It is currently planned to be a free-to-play title that will be available on both PC and consoles, which, as others have noted, is an interesting point to be made. The fact the game is coming to console means there is a good to fair chance the combat will be action-oriented, as tab-targeted combat doesn't tend to play the best from a controller. The developers have said this game is intended to be an entirely fresh look at the world of Lord of the Rings, with new locations and creatures that have yet to be experienced through the existing games and films. Whether that means it's going to look more gritty, more cutesy, or hyper-stylized in some fashion, it's a bit too early to tell. There's not a ton of information out on this MMO currently, so a lot is going to be left to speculation on how it will play, look, and feel. But if one thing's for certain, being able to draw from the rich lore Tolkien has created is a great advantage. That pretty much wraps up my list of what I think are the 10 most promising MMOs you should be checking in on throughout 2020. I'm hopeful that we're going to see a lot of these exciting titles we've been long awaiting finally start releasing, and maybe we'll even get a surprise or 2 along the way. I myself will certainly be keeping tabs on these titles throughout the year, and talking about them more right here on QuestWatch.